Welcome everyone to MaleFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Three Body Problem episode 2. It's called Red Coast. So spoilers for the episode. You're probably thinking, wait, you're back on Three Body Problem after a couple months since I reviewed the first episode? Well, this is a sponsored review from Patreon, so thanks to Fletcher for picking this one. This is wild to jump back into. To be fair, I remembered most of the broad plot beats from episode 1, and I actually watched this episode already. I watched this episode back after I reviewed episode 1 to see if I was interested in going forward, and I decided not to at the time, but we're back here, so I watched it again, obviously. And it's definitely got a lot of things going on. I feel like most of this video is probably just going to be me trying to decipher what the hell I'm seeing and try and explain it a little bit. I will say this, at least for review purposes, it's very neatly divided into different characters where I can just kind of like stick with, one character and their plot, and there's not too much overlap as of yet. Obviously some thematic stuff is overlapping, obviously things are linking up in some ways, but not in terms of the actual characters being in each other's plots too much yet. So, I mean, I'll start with the stuff in the 70s. Well, I think we're still in the 60s to begin with, but like the stuff in China with Wenji, if I'm pronouncing that right, who, of course, we see her in present day at the start of the episode watching the news about the stars blinking, so that's going on. And she's asking the other guy, Saul, what he thinks of it all, and he's a skeptic. He doesn't think it's real for whatever reason. But it's interesting looking back at this opening scene of her reacting to this based on what happens in the flashbacks by the end of the episode, because she maybe has a better idea of what's happening here. If she's connected the dots that this is tied to what happened with her in the 60s and 70s, maybe she hasn't connected those dots, but I would think she has an inclination, at the very least. But the backstory is about her at this satellite base, and they're sending out a signal, hoping to make contact with alien life, right? That's what they're doing, more or less. And I enjoyed the stuff early on where she kind of like comes up with a plan to boost the signal. She basically says, like, this signal is nowhere near strong enough, right? The technology's not there yet. This is barely going far enough to actually reach anyone. There's too many planets that are too far away, whatever. But she does a little science sort of demonstration about how the sun can amplify radio signals, and gives this demonstration of a number of years ago, Jupiter sent out some signals and it came to a different part of the planet. It came to China, I assume, specifically, like really quick after the US place got the signal, and it's because it basically bounced off the sun and got there much stronger, much quicker, whatever. So that becomes kind of what she wants to do. But of course, the person in charge at this base is like really concerned about the political symbolism of bouncing signals through the sun, because the red sun is kind of a big deal to them. So it's frustrating from that perspective. I think the more interesting thing here from a character point of view, because I read this two different ways as I was watching it, actually, because she explains this to her friends, maybe a bit of a loose term here, but like the soldier that's there sort of supervising her, and she explains all this stuff to him, and they say, we should go and present the boss with this idea, right, that this will actually work, and maybe it'll put China at the forefront of communicating with alien life. Like, we'll be the ones doing first contact, it'll put us in a place of power. Let's go and present that to him. And it smash cuts to him on his own presenting this to the boss, where he's just giving the exact same demonstration on the board that she did. And when it first cut to this, I thought, oh, this is something they've decided, because they know that he won't listen to her, because she's there out of punishment. She's there with this history of being the daughter of a criminal, of someone against the state. So I thought this was a choice that they made. But the reaction of her when she's brought into the room to sort of double check his math kind of told me that she didn't know he was going to do this on his own, and that he had kind of done this on his own to like take the credit for it. So that was an interesting little bit. I don't even think it comes up that much again later, but just that little moment kind of told me, oh, maybe he just did this behind her back, and this is kind of awkward that she's now catching him out like this, but she can't say it in front of the other guy. So, but yeah, they're basically shot down. But she pulls a sly one and does it anyway. She redirects the satellite to point to the sun, and then they make a big sort of cinematic moment out of this, where we've got like the view through the telescope, looking up at the sun like a target on it, and she's kind of looking over her shoulder and making sure none of the others in the room are even paying attention to her. And they play with the tension a little bit, where, you know, one's like trying to catch a fly, and like the sound of the glass coming down to catch it is a bit of a jump scare, and kind of like makes her, oh, have they caught me? And no, they haven't. He's just catching a fly. But they play with the tension of it ramping up and whatnot. So she does this, and then when we come back to this part of the story, we're a bit later. We're in 1977, which, to be fair, from an editing structure point of view, they did a good job of leading into it, because Benedict Wong's character in present day basically has been doing research into like basically signals coming from space and the places that have picked stuff like this up. And he mentions only 2 places picked up this signal that looked like communication in 1977. One was Ohio, and the other one was in China. But what makes that interesting is that, what's his name, Mike Evans, the rich guy who owns an oil company that showed up to the funeral in episode 1, presumably the father of the dead woman and the lover of Wenji, right? So the idea that they met in China. So he says, oh, guess where he lived in 1977, and it cuts back, and that's how we go back into the flashbacks. So from a structural point of view, and from leading the audience into that, it was a nice transition. Like, I'll give it credit there. It felt like it was neatly put together to come back into that. Because, you know, the China stuff in this episode effectively bookends the story, more or less. It's not the very first scene. The very first scene is present day Wenji, but we go straight into the, you know, the flashbacks from her, and then this brings us back into them towards the end of the episode, and then we stay there until the end, because the ending, I mean, obviously she does meet this guy, this foreigner, Mike Evans, and seemingly sees something in him. He's there to save a species of bird. He's very kind of. It's funny, actually, that he's a part of an oil company, but in the 70s, he seems to be quite more about anti-human and saving, like, animal species and, like, environmental stuff. Like, it seems like he's a very different character. But then again, maybe the oil company's just a front or something in present day. I don't know. But he talks a lot about saving a species, right? And of course, when I talk about all the VR stuff and the other plots a bit later, we'll be talking a lot about saving civilization. So this running subject is throughout the episode, this theme of saving species, of saving civilizations, of saving worlds. All these phrases in some form or another keep popping up throughout the episode. So she says she'll try and not have them build their new base here, because that's what they're there for. They're scouting a location for another radio base of some kind. And she tries to talk the other guy out of, like, going there because it is harming the natural habitat of this species of bird. And she gets kind of angry with him, and the guy kind of shoots her down. But he kind of dangles a carrot on a stick by saying, hey, the young woman who beat your father to death at that rally in the opening scene of the show, we've found her. She's at a prison camp. So we get a scene of her going to confront the woman who killed her father at a camp. And, you know, she's clearly not had, like, a great life since then. She's missing an arm. She's been in and out of places like this kind of thing. But the main thing to take away from this scene for me is that this woman does not in any way show remorse for what happened or what she did. In fact, she flat out says, I would happily kill your father again right now. There is not even a lick of maturity or repentance in any way, shape, or form from this character. And this all just is there to motivate what Wenji is going to do in the final scene of the show. Because in the final scene of the episode, she gets the response from space, right? It was mentioned in the opening section of the show that it was going to take years. We don't know how long it'll take to get a response. But clearly, 1977, enough time has passed. It's about a decade or so. Since then, I think. I mean, it's been 11 years since that rally where her father died. It was probably another couple of years before she came here, but still, close to a decade, I would assume. And this is by far the most interesting moment of this show so far, I think. Right? Because the message that comes through and it is translated to, Mandarin or whatever, says, I am a pacifist of this world. Do not respond. If you respond, they will come and they will conquer your world. That's the message. I may be paraphrasing it a little bit, but that was the gist of the message. So instantly, I quite like that message. I like that message because the idea that on this other world, which we cannot see, we don't know what it's like, we don't know what the people look like, we don't know what the life forms are like, we don't know what the society's like, we get just enough from this statement to suggest that they are a conquering type of race and that they will conquer the world, sure. But this idea that there is a resistance of some kind, there is a pacifist section of that world who are trying to intervene here, is, I think, interesting just purely because it's saying a lot about this other world without showing a single bit of it. Right? It's just a couple of lines and it suggests so much. And I like that because it gets the imagination sparking a little bit. So I do like that. And then the final moment of this episode is that Wenji chooses to respond anyway. She chooses to respond with a message that says, we're only going to kill ourselves here, or we can't save ourselves here. I will help you conquer this world. She throws out an invite for a conquering alien race to come and take over Earth. And presumably, what we're seeing in the present day story is their arrival, is their kind of like they're building up to their entrance, effectively, and moving the chess pieces into play to try and, make it easy for them by stopping any technology that might be a good weapon against them, perhaps, right? So I did like the final scene. I thought the final scene was good. I mean, I think a lot of the stuff in China with Wenji was some of the more interesting stuff in episode 1 anyway, and I think that remains pretty true for episode 2. I don't think the stuff with Mike Evans was that exciting on its own. Thematically, it did bring in a couple of ideas for the character, though, about saving a civilization and whatnot. But that said, though, everything about her figuring out how to boost the signal and then the response she gets and then what she puts back out, and the idea that she's doing all this in secret, which is also very neat, and what I like about the message that she gets in the first place, is that it suggests that whoever's received this message on this other world, wherever it may be, is also like her, right? That's why it doesn't feel like a weird thing to think about. It gives the impression that whoever's receiving this message on the other side is doing it sneakily, just like she is sending the message in the first place. Like, she wasn't supposed to boost the signal through the sun. She did it in secret, sort of right under the thumb of everyone else around her, and they just didn't notice she got away with it. Just like she's responding to this without anyone noticing. Maybe it'll turn out to do notice something in the next episode, but at least for now, she's doing this in secret when she's not supposed to be, and whoever's responding on the other side so far has been doing the same. But it also points out this idea that she seems to make this decision because she's lost faith in the people around her, right? She's lost faith in the country that she's in and the regime that controls it. We see that throughout this episode where the guy, like the high-ranking official at this place, just says, no, we're not doing that for some stupid reason. And thematically, even that idea of him doing something because of he said it's a political image problem, but you could quite easily relate that to like a spiritual or religious thing. And what I'm saying there is I'm tying it thematically to in the VR stuff when Jen is pointing out, oh, what this guy's doing is just superstition, it's not based in science. Similarly, the guy running this place, the general or whatever his rank is, he is making a choice not based on the science, despite the fact that it'll achieve the result that they're trying to achieve. Whether that we should be achieving that result is another debate, but they want to achieve that result. She's giving the science that will achieve that, and he's shooting it down effectively out of something that is meaningless, like a superstition, but in this case, just more of a political motivated thing. So, Wenji has lost faith in the people around her, she's lost faith in the human race, but this idea that someone on the other end is warning her in a very similar position suggests that whatever race is in control of this world is no better, right? the idea being that if China or Russia or America were as powerful as whatever this alien race was, they might be just as bad and conquer other places anyway. It's happened in history. Like, look at the British Empire, all that bullshit. Like, it sounds like these aliens are no better than the humans are. They're just more advanced, and they've just stuck to it rigorously, even to the point of where they are now. So, yeah, there's a lot of interesting little bits to chew on, just from what's suggested from this interaction at the end, and certainly seems like it's put in motion everything that's happening now. So it's very curious to see if Wenji in present day regrets this, if she feels remorse herself for anything that might happen as a result of this decision. But it does make why they're coming more interesting than perhaps it was before. So I will say that. Elsewhere in the episode, Augie, of course, doesn't actually have that much in this episode. She has a big thing early on where she chooses to shut down her new technology. Like, we get a demonstration of it where this synthetic diamond is cut through with fancy lasers, and it just makes little cube strips, and it's everyone's all like, "Oh, you're a genius, Doctor, you're a genius." But she's like, "No, shut it down." Because she was told, of course, if she shut it down, that the countdown would stop. And it does. When she goes outside, the countdown stops with a minute and a half left. But that's when Benedict Wong shows up and is like, "Hey, we have to talk." And it seems like the woman she saw last episode did not show up in any recording equipment. The security camera footage does not show her there, but there's evidence she actually is there. So he does believe her that she was there. He believes that people are seeing these countdowns. He suggests that whoever made her do this was maybe a rival who doesn't want her company to have this technology. So obviously he's thinking much smaller perhaps than they should be, but it's a logical thing to suggest that, okay, while a lot of this stuff is weird and doesn't make a whole lot of sense, that's the one motive he can think of. So that, that makes sense to me. But he also, of course, runs into this woman later as well, who, I don't know if we got a name for her as of yet. IMDb's telling me Tatiana, but she shows up at the cemetery when he's visiting his wife's grave, and we get a spooky reveal at the end where she was claiming to have been visiting her father, but the gravestone was for some woman that's been dead for almost a century or something like that. So, but she's sort of prodding at him and asking about his wife's death. Notably a cancer, which another character also gets in this episode. Not the same cancer. I think hers was breast cancer, and the other one was pancreatic cancer. But again, we're seeing similar things come up in different plot lines. I don't think that's an accident. But yeah, I don't really have much to say on this other than just who is this spooky lady who seems to be working for the aliens, maybe? I don't know. Especially since it said at the start that all the blinking stars, while every human on Earth could see it, and people filming it could see it through their cameras, none of the satellites could see it or pick up on it or detect it in any meaningful way, which is interesting. It does suggest that whatever is causing this is something that's just being, beamed into everyone's eyeballs as opposed to physically happening in the sky. In the same way that the countdown is just being beamed to someone's eyeballs as opposed to, I say eyeballs, really it's been beamed to their brain. But you know what I mean? It's just been beamed directly to the people who are receiving the information. Which, to be honest, sounds a lot like the VR tech in some ways, right? The VR tech is making people see things, but also feel and taste. There's the joke with Jack where he eats the dirt, and Jin's like, "You ate dirt." But, it's not that million miles away of just manipulating the brain signals to make you think that you're seeing all these things that are happening. And in the case of the VR, even feeling and hearing and all that. But to suggest that that's maybe a similar type of technology to what the aliens are doing to make everyone see the stars blinking or see the countdowns makes some sense to me. So, yeah, okay, right, we've got maybe some tangible links, perhaps. That said, though, the VR stuff, which is mostly Jin, although, as I said, Jack takes a turn, and there's some comedy with him getting killed, because he's using the headset that Jin's using, although he later gets his own, and he gets a very different setting later on, where it's a, Old England times kind of thing. Although the scenario seems to be quite similar, where two characters, an adult and a child come up to like get you started on your quest and then take you to a fortress of some kind. It seems like the stories are kind of similar, albeit with different settings that maybe fit the player a bit more, perhaps. I don't know. Because, Jack gets a bunch of old stuffy English people, whereas Jin's getting a bunch of other Asian characters. So there seems to be something there to, like tailoring it for the user kind of thing. So other than Jin going to Jack to try and like figure out what this tech is or where it came from, and he, says this is really advanced, like this is like 50 years at least out of the future, if not 150. The main thing to focus on here, I would say, is what happens in the VR game with Jin, where she meets this guy who gives her a quest, this girl that she's kind of supposed to protect. But this world that they're on, the sunlight is very harsh, and when the sun comes up, they have to hide behind some rocks. But the girl lies down on the ground and dehydrates. So this leads us to some of the weirder visuals of the episode, which is that she effectively deflates into a flat skin bag, which then this guy rolls up like a sleeping bag, and then Jin keeps a hold of it. And the idea is that people in this world can be rehydrated and be brought back once the time of chaos, as they call it, is comes to an end, and a time of prosperity and peace comes. And when they go to the fortress, he tries to predict based on some, superstition stuff about the fact that, this time will end in 8 days, we'll have 63 years of peace, it'll be a golden age. And Jin tries to talk the Emperor out of this and says, no, this is not based on science, I don't think this is going to work. But when they find out it's 8 days until everything ends, they're like, hey, put your hand on the ground, it'll speed up time, right? So on some level, the characters in here do know they're in a video game, kind of, because they give her a tutorial, effectively. But she puts her hand on the ground, and it makes time move faster, so that we get to the end of this terribly sunny period, and we get a more normal period, and they go out and they start throwing these skin bags into the pool, and we get like people reforming into living beings. Like we get like a skin bag that turns back into a woman. We get a lot of naked people coming out of a pool and being happy that they're back to life. So, it's not Game of Thrones, but they still got a bunch of naked people in here, did the creators. Which is not a big deal. I'm just cracking a joke because Game of Thrones was known for having dirty scenes. But the girl is also put in the pool, and she comes out, and this cheers up Jin. It feels like, things have went nice. However, what happens after all this happiness, weirdness, because it's such a weird visual and concept, but after all this, they realize, oh wait, no, we're not in a time of great peace. We're in a time of, it's the opposite of what happened before. Instead of being ultra hot and like burning people alive, now it's going to be ultra cold. So all of these characters all freeze to death. We get this visual of the girl freezing and her face chipping away. It doesn't affect Jin though. And like a moderator of the game shows up, because it was the same woman who killed Jack when Jack tried to play her game. She shows up and says, okay, you failed to save this world. You failed to save this civilization. But you did deduce that science is more useful than superstition. So you must use that in level 2 to save the civilization. And that's kind of where this comes to an end. However, we do see like 3 bodies, if you will, 3 celestial bodies in the sky, kind of like forming like a big eclipse. Which maybe suggests that we're getting to what the 3-body problem actually is. But it definitely seems like this video game, if you can even call it that, is all about trying to figure out a way to save worlds. It's about trying to save different worlds. Maybe one's more important than the other because it's about trying to save a specific world. Maybe this is about trying to save the aliens' home world. Maybe they're going out and conquering people to try and save their own world. I don't know if that's where the video game indeed comes from. That said, though, after this, we do get a glimpse that someone, seemingly on Earth, a human being, is watching the players of this game on a bunch of monitors and observing who's succeeding, how they're succeeding or failing. I don't know, but it feels like whoever's getting this game, and because keep in mind, this VR headset's been sent out to like, it's scientists, it's people who are cutting edge, people who might be smart enough to figure out these problems. So it does feel like this video game is designed to solve a problem, probably the three-body problem, although I still don't know exactly what the three-body problem is. Maybe it's a planet that has three suns, and that's what's causing this extreme weather or whatever. But I'm presuming, though, that when we go to level 2 and we're on a different world with a different civilization, that the problem that the planet faces will be different, which means it's probably not the exact same thing. Maybe there's 3 planets to save, and they all have their own unique things because of their solar systems or whatever. Maybe that's the three-body problem. I don't know. Right? But this is what the episode was giving me. And at the very least, it does. I do feel confident that this video game is designed to get some of the smartest people on the planet trying to save the world. Now, does this tech come from the aliens? Now, the reason why you might think that is because it's so advanced, and that's a fair reason to suspect that. However, the thought also occurred to me that this is, however the tech exists, whoever came up with this super advanced tech that is far beyond anything else anyone has, that maybe this is someone that knows the aliens is coming, and they're trying to get people to solve the problems that will help fight the aliens in some way. Maybe. Even though the problem in this VR situation, in this case, was not a physical threat, it was like a weather problem, effectively. So, I don't know. Like, I'm spitballing based on all the things that the episode gave me to work with. Whether or not this is a human design thing to help solve the problems that will help combat the aliens that come eventually, I don't know. But certainly, I would guess that the fancy laser tech that Augie was working on was something that could be used against the aliens, and that's why they were determined to tell her to stop doing it. And all of the other scientists that were been told to stop doing things is because they're all developing things that are getting to a point where, hey, that could actually be used to fight back. And the aliens want to stop that from happening, like want to stop any development of any kind that could get us. And let's assume that the VR headsets for a second are something that's been used to hopefully come up with a way to fight the aliens. Maybe the idea is that the aliens can't monitor that because it's all like intellectual, it's all in someone's head with a VR headset. Maybe because it's not a concrete piece of equipment that's being made, it's just theoretical ideas. It's the one way that humanity has right now of trying to actually figure out a way to solve the problem of the aliens coming. I don't know. Anyway, like, if nothing else, the episode got me thinking about all these different things. So I'll give it credit for that. You know, back when I reviewed episode 1, I said that I didn't really care about any of the characters, and I still kind of have that problem, by and large. The concepts are a bit more interesting now. The characters are still kind of falling flat for me. Even actors who I've liked in other things, I don't really feel anything for the characters as of yet. So, you know, we'll see where that goes. A couple of character things to set up in this episode is that Saul clearly has a problem with... I don't know if I'd say that he's addicted to drugs or whatever, but he certainly... I think Augie calls him a child because he just kind of does stuff. Like, you know, he's clearly was out like on acid on a field somewhere when she wanted to call him, and we get a little bit of a conversation between them when he shows up the next day. The other character, who I did not remember at all from the first episode, by the way, but there's this other character named Will who has cancer, and he's got a crush on Jin. I vaguely remember someone having a crush on Jin from the first episode, so I guess that's him. But he is dying. He thinks there's no point in even fighting it because he's been told it's stage 4 and there's nothing he can do. And Jack, who he's having lunch with, is like, F that. No, you've given up on so many things because you believe you weren't worthy of. You're not giving up on this. You're going to at least try. And I think on a thematic sense, that's at least saying that the characters in this show have to at least try and save the human race. They have to at least try and save Earth. And then thematically, maybe you could argue the whole thing with, like, you know, Mike Evans, the rich guy. Well, he's rich in the present day anyway. But him in the 70s trying to save this species of bird because no one else will help the bird. Maybe that's also suggesting that a third alien race, well, not a third, a second alien race, so the third overall planet, right? Possibly third body, celestial body, you know, but maybe a third party of alien race will maybe end up helping the humans in the same way that he has to be the third party that helps the bird out and versus all the other humans who are cutting down trees and building stuff in areas that's destroying habitats and whatnot. Maybe the idea is that there will be a third entity of some kind, possibly an alien entity, Maybe that third entity is what designed the VR stuff. Maybe that's why the tech's so advanced, is because it was an alien bit of tech. This is an alien species that's behind this, but it's not the invading alien species. This is the pacifist do-gooder alien race that's trying to help humanity fight back, perhaps. Okay, I've spit out a lot of things. Maybe some of that has some sense to it. Maybe some of it will pan out. I don't know. That's all I've got based on episode 2. So, yeah. So I don't know if I'll be continuing with this, because Fletcher had me do 2 different shows. He had me do an episode of Ripley and an episode of this, and he's going to decide now which one he wants me to continue in the following months. So we'll see what he picks. But yes, so yeah. Obviously, if you comment below, please don't spoil anything from beyond this episode. Not just for me, but for others who might find these reviews later and want to sort of watch along as they're going through the show. So thank you very much for joining me. You can, of course, support everything over on Patreon. I wouldn't be able to do all of this if it wasn't for the support on Patreon or via YouTube memberships and things like that. Any and all support does help. And, of course, simply liking, subscribing, all that usual stuff helps out a bunch too. So thank you very much for joining me. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?